theyeshiva.net.
Today's class is dedicated L'Zecher Nishmas and Le'elu Nishmas in loving memory of Rabbi Yisrael Yitzchak ben Reb Yisrael Wasserman, in tribute to his 40th yahrzeit today, Daled Menachem Av. Dedicated by his children, he was a devoted teacher and mechanech at Mechon Chana at the Lubavitch Yeshiva, leaving a lasting impact on countless students and community members to this very day. A truly refined and very special and gentle human being and Jew. May his memory be a blessing, and may be a gute better for his entire family and Klal Yisrael. Tahei nishmasei tzura b'tzer hachayim. Amen. Keni hiratzen. Thank you very, very much. Ve'kitza v'ranan u'sheich ne'afar b'karev mamish. Okay, everybody make yourself comfortable. Thank you for gracing us today. So there's one source sheet, and let's begin. Next week there will also be a class, Be'ezer Hashem, next Tuesday. But after that, there will be a few weeks of break. I'll announce exactly next week. But next week we're still meeting together, Be'ezer Hashem, Tuesday, 9:30 a.m. Today, we're in the middle of the 9 days. Today is the 4th day of Menachem Av. So obviously it's the middle of the 9 days that begin on Rosh Chodesh Av through the 9th of Av, Tisha B'Av, next Sunday. We're going to learn an extraordinary and really enigmatic and very strange story that is recorded in the Talmud and the Gemara, Tractate Gittin. There's one Masechta of Mishnayos and Gemara that's dedicated to the laws of divorce. It's called Gittin. And it's in the section of Nashim, the section of women, just like you have Kiddushin, you have Gittin. And in that Masechta, in that tractate, there's quite a few pages that are dedicated to the story of Tisha B'Av. The main story of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, the famous story, for example, about Kamsa bar Kamsa, and many other stories about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and Vespasian and Titus, and how the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, and the events before, and the events in middle, and the events after. And a lot of the calamities and tragic events are all there in a few pages in Tractate Gittin, beginning on page 56. And it goes for a few pages. And in fact, on Tisha B'Av, we usually don't learn Torah, but we do learn those subjects that are connected to Tisha B'Av, like Eicha, Megillas Eicha, or Yirmiyahu, the chapters that deal with Galus, or the Gemara and the Midrashim that deal with the themes of Tisha B'Av. So this is one of the famous Gemaras that is always learned by many, many on Tisha B'Av. In that sequence of stories and history, there is an extraordinary story that we're going to learn today. And it comes right in the middle of the whole discussion of Tisha B'Av. We'll soon see why and how. And the story takes us into what you would call the very mystical realm, and the attempt of people to communicate with the spirits of those who are not living anymore. So let's see the actual story. You have it here on top in the Hebrew, the right side you have the original Aramaic from the Gemara, and on the left side I took the English translation and just edited it a little bit. Gittin Nun Vav Amid Beis, Talmud Gittin 56b. You could follow any side you want. I'll read and translate. Unkelus bar Kloinikus bar Achase de Titus Hava. Titus had a nephew. His sister had a son. This man's name was Unkelus. His father's name was Kloinikus. Who is Titus? Who is Titus? Titus's father was Vespasian, Aspasianus. He was the general that was sent by Nero, the Caesar of Rome, to put down the revolt of the Jews against Rome and destroy Jerusalem. Vespasian was the main commander, went dispatched from Rome to Jerusalem to crush the Jewish revolt against the Roman tyranny and yoke and take them down. In middle, Nero was gone. Either one version is he disappeared, either committed suicide or something else. And Vespasian was brought back to Rome to become the new Caesar, the new leader. So he sent his son Titus to continue the war against the Jews. So Titus was the one who actually destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, who burned Jerusalem, who massacred the Jews, who exiled the Jews. And in fact, after his victory, he comes back to Rome, and they built for him, if you ever been to Rome, they built for him what's called Sha'ar Titus, the Titus Arch. It still exists. It was built literally a few years after the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. When Titus comes back to Rome, there's a huge victory march, and they carve out this amazing arch in his honor. And still today, you could see what is engraved on that arch, you know? You remember? The image of Jewish slaves being led in chains by Roman legions, carrying the vessels of the Beis HaMikdash. For example, you'll see there the menorah, you'll see trumpets. Last year, Tisha B'Av, exactly. It's quite strange because the bottom of the menorah there's a dragon, and the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash there was no dragon. So it's interesting. You have to understand what's going on over there. Also, that menorah is round. According to the Rambam and Rashi, the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash was diagonal, not round. You see the trumpets, you see the table, and you see these slaves being led. This was all to represent the victory of Titus, against the Jewish people. The destruction of the Beis HaMikdash happened either in the year 68, 69, or 70. There's different opinions. One of those 3 years, 68, 69, 70, after the Common Era. Now is 2025. So this goes back a little less than 2,000 years, 68, 69, or 70. In the Jewish calendar would be the year 3,828 from creation, or 3,829 from creation, or 3,830 from creation. Gimel, Taf, Chav Ches, Chav Tes, or Taf, Lamed. Titus has a nephew. His name is Unkelus. He has a father named Kloinikus, who's a Roman noble. Unkelus comes from the family of nobility. Obviously, his uncle is the leader of Rome, the Caesar of Rome. And Unkelus is obviously a very curious young man. He's inquisitive. He's a seeker. He's a spiritual man. He's searching. And in the entire process, he discovers Judaism. The Jewish people fascinate him. And what happens? He wants to convert to Judaism. Now, this itself is fascinating because he's living in a generation when Rome is on the top of the world. The Jewish people are being wiped out. It doesn't even look like they have a future. But yet Unkelus wants to convert. He wants to become a ger. What does he do? So the Gemara says he does something fascinating. Azal aske letitus benegida. It's the third line. Azal aske letitus benegida. He went and he raises Titus from the grave through necromancy. You know what necromancy is? Did I pronounce it correctly? Yes. It's basically communicating with the dead. In fact, it's discussed in Chumash. One of the forms of kishuv, of sorcery that is forbidden is oiv. And what is oiv? Oiv is a way of communicating with the spirit of those who are not here anymore. Obviously, Unkelus had some deep, mystical, spiritual powers, and he decides he wants to have a conversation with his uncle who's already dead. So this is after the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Titus went back to Rome, he died, and Unkelus wants to speak to his uncle. Amar le, he asks him a question. He says to him, quite an interesting question. Man chashiv bahu alma. Tell me, Titus, who is the most important in that world? Not in this world, in that world. In the world where you are now. So Titus tells him, Amar lo, he says to him, Yisrael, the Jewish people. The arch enemy of the Jewish people, after his death, says in that world, it's topsy-turvy. The Jewish people are the most important. So Unkelus says, Mahu li de bukibe. Should I then attach myself to them? Should I become part of them? I want to become a Jew. Amar le, Titus says, let me give you my advice. He says, Milayu nefishin. Their commandments are numerous. Their Torah is heavy, it's loaded. Lo matzis l'koyaminu. You will not be able to fulfill their edicts, their laws, their rituals. It's too much. It's too intense. It's too intricate. It's too overwhelming. It's not for a good, nice Roman boy like you who's destined to enjoy life. It's not for you. I'm going to give you better advice. Zil igribu bahu alma v'havis reisha. You know what you should do? Go out and make a war against them in this world. That's what you should do. Bother them, destroy them, harm them. You know why? V'havis reisha. That's how you become a leader in this world. And he explains the ksiv, the pasuk says in Eicha, Hayu tzareha l'roish kol hameitzer liYisrael nasa roish. Whoever oppresses the Jewish people becomes a chief, becomes a roish, becomes popular, becomes leader. You want success? Become an enemy of the Jewish people, and you will automatically rise to the top. That's my advice to you. Amar le, Unkelus says to his uncle, Dinei dahu gavra b'mai. Tell me, what is the punishment of this man, meaning of you? What's your punishment? Amar le, he says, b'may de pasuk hanafshe. Kol yoyma mechanshi le lekitmi v'daini le v'kol le mevadri le hashev yam. Every day his ashes are gathered, they judge him, they burn him, and they scatter his ashes over the 7 seas. He finished with Titus. He decides he needs to speak to another Gentile. Who's another good Gentile to speak to about the idea of conversion? He decides we're going to go back some years to Balaam. Let's remember who Balaam is. Balaam is the star of Parshas Balak. Balak, the king of Moab, on the Transjordan, hires Balaam to curse the Jewish people. He's considered the greatest prophet of the day. In fact, our sages say he was equivalent in his prophecy to Moshe Rabbeinu. That's what a great spiritual genius he was. And yet he was also an arch enemy of the Jewish people. So Unkelus decides he wants to speak to Balaam. So that's the second paragraph in the Hebrew and in the English, Aramaic and English. Azal aske leBalaam benegida. Unkelus goes and he raises Balaam from the grave. He uses again his skill of necromancy and he raises Balaam. Amar le, he says to Balaam, man chashiv ba'u alma. Who is the most important in the next world? Amar le, Balaam says, Yisrael, the Jewish people. So he asks the famous question, we already know his question, Ma'uli dipuki bahu. Should I attach myself to them? Should I have dvekus with them? Amar le, Balaam says, Lo sidra shloimam v'tavasam kalayamim. No. You shall not seek their peace nor their welfare all the days of your life. Stay far away from these people. In fact, Balaam is quoting a pasuk that what says in Parshas Kiseitze about Ammon and Moav. He uses that pasuk, stay far away from the Jewish people. Amar le, Unkelus says to him, Dini dahu gavra b'mai, what is your punishment? Amar le, Balaam says to him, B'shichvas zera roitachas. He is penalized in boiling semen, seed. What's the connection? So Rashi and the Mefarshim explain that Balaam was the one who gave advice to Midian and Moav to entice the Jewish people through their women. The entire plague that broke out was when the daughters of Midian and Moav went to the Jewish people and enticed them and engulfed them in their adultery and the idolatry of Baal. In addition to that, Chazal tell us that Balaam had relations with his own donkey. He was completely corrupt in the area of relationships. This is his penalty. Balaam finished his conversation with Uncle Titus. He finished his conversation with Balaam. He decides to go to one more person. And here, there's a very interesting thing. When you open up most Gemaras, if you look in the Gemara, it will say he went and he brought up Hahu Gavra, some person. In other places, it says Paisheya Yisrael, a Jewish sinner. Most Gemaras had to delete what it really said. Today, we already have other versions, so we know that because of censorship, most Gemaras were printed in Christian countries, so they could not write the name of the third person who Unkelus brought up from the grave, which was Yashka. Oisi Ha'ish, Yeshu. Today we have a book called Chesroinais Hashas, where they printed everything that was deleted from the earlier editions of Gemara that went through a censor before it was published. So over there it says clearly it was Yeshu. In some places it even says Yeshu HaNoitzri, which means from Nazareth, Christianity, Nazarus. He basically brought up Yashka, Oisi Ha'ish as we call it. So that's why I put it in here, because this is based on the more modern editions where they found the original texts. But it's so interesting because when you open up a regular Gemara today, it'll just say Ahu Gavra, some person, or Pesheya Yisrael, some sinner of Israel. Why is the name not there? Because it was not safe to print in Christian countries. So let's see the next one. Azal aske benegida Yeshu hanoitzri. Unkelus raises Yeshu from the grave through necromancy. Amar le, he asks Yeshu, man chashiv bahu alma. Who is important in that world? In the next world, Amar le, Yashka says, Yisrael, the Jewish people. Ma'ali debuki bahu. So I want to ask you a question, Yashka. Should I connect to them? Should I become one of them? Amar le. So Yeshu HaNoitzri says to Unkelus, Toivasam drosh, ra'asam loy tidrosh. Their welfare you shall always seek. Their misfortune you shall never seek. Whoever touches them is regarded if he's touching the apple of his eye, the apple of God's eye. Touching the Jewish people, you're touching the apple of Hashem's eye. He's actually quoting a pasuk from Zechariah, who says whoever touches the Jewish people, kilu noigeya bebavas einai. Bavas einai is the most sensitive part of the eye, that when somebody touches it, it's very, very painful. And it's very, very, very sensitive. And it's so central to our life as human beings with vision. So Zechariah says whoever touches the Jewish people and harms them, it's like he's touching either the apple of his own eye, meaning he's harming himself in the most powerful way, or even Hashem's apple of the eye. This is what Yeshu and Shabti Tzvi tells Unkelus. You should always seek their goodness, never try to harm them, because whoever touches them is touching the apple of God's eye. This is his advice to Unkelus. And now the Gemara gives its own comment to the story. Unkelus finished his conversation, and he probably converted to Judaism, as we know, but now the Gemara gives its own final commentary. Tochazi, come see. Look at the difference between the greatest sinners of Israel and the greatest prophets of the nations of the world. Look at the difference. Balaam is such a great prophet. In many ways, he's a spiritual genius. He has the skill of prophecy. And yet, what does he say about the Jewish people? Stay far, far away from them. Don't seek their goodness. Don't seek their peace. Never connect to them. And here you have Yoshka, who's a Pesheya Yisrael, a sinner among the Jewish people. And what does he say? In a moment of truth, he says, of course, connect to them. Always seek their goodness. Never do harm to them. Touching them is touching the apple eye of God. So Gemara makes this comment about the difference between Yoshka and Balaam and Titus. The first two were Ummas Ha'olam, even a prophet, and therefore their advice was stay away from them, even in the world of truth, where they were now. And Yoshka had the opposite advice. This is the story in the Gemara. Okay. What is the meaning of this last line? Comes the Maharal of Prague. And it's important to say who the Maharal was. Maharal stands for Mordenu Harav Rabbeinu Leva. His name was Yehuda Leva ben Betzalel. And he was known as the chief rabbi of Prague, today in Czech Republic. He was born in around 1522 and passed away Yudches Elul Chai Elul 1609. He's known as the Maharal of Prague. He, in fact, in his day had to deal a lot with blood libels that came from the Christian communities in Europe that began already in the 12th century, accusing Jews of slaughtering Christian children before Pesach and using their blood for matzah. And the Maharal dealt a lot with this. He was also one of the greatest thinkers and seminal writers and teachers of Jewish thought, ethics, philosophy, Kabbalah, Machshava in his generation. He wrote many, many works, the Maharal. They're very, very deep, very profound, some very hard to understand. Extremely, extremely deep mind and deep thinker. He was the Av Bezdin and the Rosh Yeshiva of many cities in Posen and Poland, Niklasburg, and then ultimately Prague, where he is buried. He has a sefer called Netzach Yisrael, the eternity of Israel. It's a very, very beautiful book about the eternity of the Jewish people. There he focuses on this story in the 5th chapter. He says, why did Unkelus want these 3 people? I mean, he could have raised a lot of people. A lot of people have died over the years. Why these 3 people? So the Maharal says something very interesting. He says, these 3 people exemplified the 3 cardinal sins of Judaism. Gilui Arayos, Shvichas Damim, Avodah Zarah. There's idolatry, there's adultery, and murder. The difference between the 3 is profound. Shvichas Damim is the greatest corruption of person against person, taking somebody's life. The chutzpah of that, the audacity of that, the cruelty of it, is obviously its most barbaric, sadistic form of evil between Adam lachaver. Avodah Zarah is the corruption in the relationship between a person and his creator or her creator. It's substituting truth for falsehood. True God, true energy for fake energy. That's Avodah Zarah. Gilui Arayos, the Maharal says, adultery is the corruption of the person vis-a-vis the person himself or herself. It's a person who has no boundaries, no self-respect, no respect for other. They're literally like an animal, because the most powerful energy in a person is their sexual energy. That's their intimate energy. And when that's squandered, when there's no boundaries, when there's no respect, the person lost all respect for themselves, because this is their deepest, most intimate, sacred energy. And when they betray that, it shows a complete moral decomposition internally. So the Unkelus knew that these three elements define the great boundaries of Judaism. Gilui Arayos, and the three sins one has to die for, no other sins. Gilui Arayos, Shfichas Damim, Avodah Zarah. So he went to the three people. So he went to the three people who literally mastered these three sins to get their perspective. Let's see. Titus was the master of Shfichas Damim. He was the great murderer, one of the greatest butchers in history. He massacred so many Jews as he destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, destroyed Jerusalem with tremendous cruelty. In fact, the Gemara says right before the story that Titus took a knife and he stabbed the paroiches, the curtain, separating the holy from the Holy of Holies. He stabbed it, and there was a miracle and blood came out. And Titus said, I managed to murder God. I managed to murder God as the blood came out of the paroiches. Why was there blood there? Some say because the Kohen Gadol used to sprinkle blood on Yom Kippur at the paroiches and other karbanos, the blood was sprinkled, even though it wasn't supposed to go in, but probably one time or a few times it went in. Tisha says it represented God's pain of the Churban. There's other explanations. Titus thought he killed God, but this was his symbol, blood. Blood. So Unkelus wanted to get his perspective on connecting to the Jewish people. Then he went to Balaam. Balaam's was Gilui Arayos. As I told you, Balaam's donkey wasn't just his donkey. He was married to his donkey, so to speak. Yeah, that's what it says. Baala, he had relations with his donkey. When the donkey opened up the mouth, this wasn't just a donkey that he used for riding. This was a donkey that he used for intimate pleasures. That is why when Balaam could not curse the Jewish people and he went back home, he gave advice. And he said, Elokehem shel elu soinei zimahu. The God of the Jewish people despises promiscuity, despises adultery, despises disrespect in marriage and relationships. Complete moral breakdowns. And therefore get the daughters of Midian and the daughters of Moav to entice the Jewish men, and you will have a downfall. And he was successful. There was a huge plague, and Pinchas went and killed Zimri and Cosby, and he stopped the plague. This was all Bilam's scheme, Bilam's advice, as discussed in Parshas Pinchas and in Parshas Matos. The third person was Yeshu. What was Yeshu? Avodah Zarah. He became Avodah Zarah. And, he turned into some deity. He turned into some deity. I was once, my brother once told me that he was sitting with a bunch of cardinals and bishops, very high-level clergy of the Christian religion. They wanted to visit a Jewish community, so they were, so to speak, fabraging with him for a few hours. And they asked him to sing a song, and he sang, and he spoke, and they were very, very open. They were very warmed and inspired. So at some point, when they decided they could already be more vulnerable, they looked at him and they said, Rabbi, tell us the truth. Who is the Messiah? Who is the Messiah? What is he supposed to say? He didn't want to ruin, a beautiful afternoon. It was nice. So he looked at them, he said, it's one Jew or another. And that was good. They got it. I was once at an event, so there was one of the attempts that I didn't use this whole idea of the chosen people. God chose you. Come on, it's racism. I'm like, you're a Christian. He says, yeah. I'm like, you're talking to me. You guys took a Jewish kid, you turned him into God himself. What do you want from me? You turned him into God himself. So this is the Avodah Zarah piece. So that's why he interviews, so to speak, these three people, Titus, Balaam, and Yashka. This is what the Maharal says. But now, the Maharal goes one step further, and he says, but look at the difference in the answers. And he says something extremely, extremely moving and profound and pretty earth-shattering when you think about it. So this is your second source. You'll see in the pages, Netzach Yisrael, the Maharal, Perek Hey. And he says, Ki Poishe, this is an exact quote. Ki Poishe Yisrael, you see the second source, first page of your source sheets. There's only 2 pages. Double-sided, the first side. The first section was the Gemara, right, in English and Hebrew, and now you're going to the second section. Netzach Yisrael Maharal, under the box, yeah. Under the box. Perek Hey. Ki Poishe Yisrael. the sinners of Israel, Nasan Hashem Yizbarich Behem Neshama Tahira. God has imbued them with a pure soul. He's talking here about Yashka. Rak, kasha achar kach ba'olam haza, not to achar harishus. However, in this world, they gravitated, they were schlepped, and they went down the rabbit hole of rishus, of wickedness. Ulefichach chetam davar mikra ba'olam haza. And therefore, their sin essentially is circumstantial in this world. It's not essential. It's something that happened through circumstances where something alien attached itself to them, but it's not who they are intrinsically. Aval shaloi ba'olam haza, and therefore the moment they're not in this world, ein chaytim. There's no sin anymore. Umaydim ala emes. They embrace the truth, v'chayzrim behem, and they regret everything. Mitzad ki yesh lahem shoyrish toiv, because they have a good, positive, holy root. And when they go back to the root, it's all good. They right away know what the truth is. K'moshe amru chazal be'eruvin, as our sages said in Tractate Eruvin. What did the sages say in Tractate Eruvin? So this is the next source. Eruvin Yutesam and Aleph. Hainu the Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi taught us. This is in Gemara Eruvin 19. My diksiv, it says in Tehillim, Oivrei be'eme kabacha mayan yeshisu gam brachos yata moira, which means those who pass the valley of tears, they allow their tears to be like a well and full of blessings. So he explains. Oivrei, who's Oivrei? Elu b'nei adam sha'oivrin ha'ritzayna shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. These are people who transgress God's will. Emek, what's Emek? Depth, the valley. Shema'mikin lehem gehenim. They go deep into purgatory. Habacha, they cry. Sheboichin u'mayridin d'mayos kamayan shel shisin. In that process, they sob like a wellspring that flows. That's how many tears they have. Gam brachos yata moira, they also bless. Shematzdikin alein esadin. They justify their process. They're completely fine with their process. They justify, they appreciate it. They appreciate this process of purgatory. V'oimrim lefanav ribono shel olam, they say, Master of the universe, yafa danta, good judgment, yafa zikisa, good merit when somebody merits, yafa chiyafta, good guilt when somebody is guilty. It's very beautiful, it's good that you created purgatory for the wicked, paradise for the tzaddikim. In other words, they're completely fine with the process, they justify, they thank him for it. They're crying in remorse and they're thankful. Rishayim, even at the door of Gehenna, don't do tshuva. Says, like Kashi, it's not a question. Ha Parshi Yisrael, ha Parshi Umas Ha'olam. Here you're talking about the sinners of the nations. Here you're talking about the sinners of the Jewish people. It's a whole different experience. What is the Maharal bringing this for? So he's teaching here something extremely, extremely powerful what the Gemara is saying. And who is the Gemara saying it about? Not just a Jew who didn't do Mayim Achrayim, or a Jew who missed benching, or missed mincha, or missed shalashudas, or even a Jew who didn't put on tefillin. He's talking about which Jew? He's talking about Yeshu HaNoitzri, which I don't have to describe to this crowd what this Jew achieved and what were the results of the religion that he created in terms of the long Jewish, challenging, traumatic exile. Nonetheless, the Gemara says, I want you to see the difference between him and Titus and Balaam. And the Maharal explains why. Why? So he says, because you have to understand what it means to have a Jewish soul. What it means is that essentially, intrinsically, you're completely aligned with truth, with the divine will. What happens in this world, though, is things get attached to people. They build shells, husks. Their soul gets eclipsed. They don't know who they are. They're alienated from themselves. So they go in different directions. They cultivate different behaviors. They develop different philosophies. They engage in different types of habits and instincts and relationships of one form or another that completely alienate them from their own intrinsic core. As a result of that, I could run, or they could run their entire life, and they are essentially in survival mode. from one survival mode to another survival mode, from one coping mechanism to another coping mechanism, from one thing that feels good to another thing that feels good, from one distraction to another distraction to another distraction to another distraction. And that's what happens. But that's all until they see the truth. The moment the curtains are removed, the moment they're invited into an atmosphere, into a cocoon, not a cocoon, into a space, because it's not a cocoon, into a space, into an environment where there is emes, where there's truth, where you can't lie anymore, where the cover-ups don't have power anymore, the bubbles are gone, the shells are removed, the husks are punctured, the balloon, the arrogance, the ego, the stupidity, the folly, whatever adjectives you want to add, you can add in your own mind. It's all punctured, and suddenly it's a place of truth. We call olam emes. What happens? They suddenly see who they are. They're like, oh my God, my whole life was one long myth. It was one long lie. Immediately, it's all gone. That's what the Maharal says. Immediately, they know the truth. They realize that everything was simply a lie that was created, a coping mechanism that was created. And the tragedy of it is, when somebody sees that really I lived my entire life, literally in a shell. Imagine the chick remains in the egg for eternity. I think that egg is reality, and I refuse to come out of it, and it's really a coping mechanism because that feels safe for me. And in that process, I can engage in a lot of harm to myself and sometimes in a lot of harm to others. But the Maharal says that's all until they touch the truth. The moment they touch the truth, they see who they are, and they're like, this has nothing to do with me. And that's why he says, when Yeshu comes to that world, it's checkmate, the game is over. He tells Unkelus, of course you should go to the Jewish people. What's the question? They are the apple eye. They are the apple of the eye of God. What's the question? This is it. This is truth. In this world, there was so much corruption. This is exactly the truth. The truth is that sometimes I don't even know what I don't know. I could be living behind so many walls and veils and curtains and facades. I know that there's something torturing me inside. There's some dissonance, but I don't have the clarity or the courage or the guidance or the mentorship to even be able to realize what is going on. And remember, the main commandment in this world of the animal soul is survive, 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 be comfortable, be comfortable. So sometimes I get deeper into my mess and deeper into my shell to build layers and layers and layers and layers. And then comes a moment of healing. Then comes a moment of truth. And it takes, you know how long it takes? It takes less than a second. It's an energy. The moment you get to see, wow, how many cover-ups did I create through my life to avoid my pain, to avoid discomfort, to protect myself. And this is true in every person's world in their own way. Yeshu took it to a very, very extreme place. We'll soon see what happened to him at the end of the class. But in every person's life, this is the nature of the difference of Alma de Shikra and Olam HaEmes. The world of lies and the world of truth. And I should say, it was one of the great Kabbalists, Rabbeinu Menachem Azariah of Fanu, Italy, Ramemi Fanu. And he writes, people think Gan Eden and Gehenna are in that world. He says, Gan Eden and Gehenna really are in this world. He says, every person creates their Gan Eden and their Gehenna in this world. He says, sensitive people, when they see somebody, they see the Gan Eden or the Gehenna that they live in this world. That's why it says when Yaakov walked into Yitzchak, and when Esav walked into Yitzchak to give the food, by Yechrad Yitzchak Charad G'dayla, Yitzchak started to tremble. Rashi says, why did he tremble? He saw that the Gehenna walked in with him. Yaakov walked in, he smelled Gan Eden. It wasn't Gehenna walked in with him. What fires walked in with him? We make a mistake. We think Gehenna is like this physical oven, this physical furnace. Gehenna is an energy that when a person is living in lies, it's a toxicity that they live in, the purgatory. Gan Eden is the energy of purity. So the Gan Eden and the Gehenna is not created there, it's created here. It's just here, not everybody sees it. Here I can get away with calling Gehenna Gan Eden, Gehenna, lies, truth, truth, lies. I can get away with the delusions because there's so much concealment. That world, there's just no concealment. So you see, oh, this is nauseous. This is nauseating. How many myths and lies I lived with. And it may have been even unintentionally, by the way, by so many people. It's usually very unintentionally. It's like the person just goes into that space and they're just coping. They're just surviving. And it's a lot of grief. And that's what the Gemara says there. When these Parshas Yisrael come into Gehenna, they start crying, they sob, they grieve for a life that was so tragic because it was so disassociated. A life that was so alienated from my heart. I couldn't have an open heart. I couldn't live with my core. I couldn't live with my past. I didn't even know who I was. I was just seeking one comfort, another comfort, another comfort, another comfort. I couldn't even respect my own boundaries. I needed attention from this one. I needed validation from this one. I needed to pursue this addiction, this entertainment. I didn't even know who I was. There's so many tears. As they come in there, they're crying, there's grief. And that grief is not bad. That grief is healing. Because it's the grief that allows you to release what happened. That's the idea of the grief in Gehenna. It's not a bad thing. That's why they come and they say, God, wow, thank you. Thank you. This is also a very deep perspective. You know, we learn about Gan Eden and Gehenna, and some people are still traumatized from the way it was presented to them in school. And a lot of their Judaism is filled with such guilt and negativity, and a lot of people have a lot of issues with God because of this. What we really have to heal in all of this. Because what the Maharal is really explaining to us is, and I'll just give a simple example. Let's say a person has been living with a blocked heart, or with tremendous pain, or with tremendous anxiety their whole life. And they finally come to a person who can heal them, or a person who can help them heal, or a modality that can help them heal. Anybody who has done any of this work knows that one of the first things they're going to experience is tremendous grief. They're going to start seeing the pain. They're going to start seeing the grief. And there's no way out of it if you don't go through it. If I want to avoid it, if I want to bypass it, I won't go out of it because it's still stuck there. But that grief, if somebody will tell the healer, no, don't do it. Usually most people, at least if they have some basic element of courage and self-respect, say, no, I need more of this. I'm coming back. Why are you coming back? Why are you coming back? It's really a Gehenna. Because this is the path to Gan Eden. The path to Gan Eden. Gehenna is part of Gan Eden. Gehenna is really releasing the toxicity. It's the grief for all of my fakeness. It's the grief for anything that I ingested, even from other people. Venom, poison, self-hate, self-loathing, self-shame, self-guilt, whatever it is, everybody in their own way. And I avoided it my entire life, not even to admit to myself that I'm dealing with it. Because that itself is painful. Everybody wants to say, I'm a happy person, life is good, Baruch Hashem, everything is good. But internally, there is dissonance. Internally, there's torture. And I have to face that. And that's what they face. And they're thankful. They say, wow, I'm coming back. Give me more. It's not to torture. It's not to oppress. It's to cleanse. It's to clear up the infections. And now the person can go back to their source. Oh, wow, I'm a beautiful person. I'm a gorgeous person. I'm a divine person. The Maharal says the Shayush is beautiful. It's amazing. They got stuck in Moshiach and insanity. Insanity attaches itself to us. How true is this, what the Maharal is telling us? You see it in our generation so much. People live with so much pressure and so many negative stories about themselves. And all of this has nothing to do with their essence. Literally, if anybody would touch their essence, they would see a whole different person. But it's a deep process to be able not to bypass, to be able to embrace all of these parts and realize what I'm dealing with and sit with it and then find and lean into my true inner core and strength. So this is what the Gemara tells us, this difference between Titus, Balaam, and even Yashke, Tachazi, Ma Bein, Paisha Yisrael, L'Neviye, Umayis Ha'olam. Which now brings us to the next point. And if you turn over your page, please. One of the greatest Hasidic masters was known as Reb Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin. They call him the Kohen Gadol. Reb Tzadok of Lublin lived in Lublin. Lublin is Poland. He was actually born into a family that was very, very opposed to Hasidim and Hasidus. But then he went on a long journey and he met some very interesting people. He became a student of the Ishbitzer Rebbe and of Reb Leibel Eger, the grandson of Reb Akiva Eger. And then in his last years, he became a Rebbe and a spiritual master in Lublin, where he passed away in Elul, 1900. He wrote fascinating works. He was quite a genius of a man and a big scope and a very original and creative. And he has another fascinating piece on this story in Gemara. And he says, why are all the stories of Tisha B'Av put into the Maseches Gittin, to the tractate of divorce? Why there? You say, well, it has to go somewhere. He says, no, whenever there's a story in a particular tractate, it belongs there. And he says, because Tisha B'Av looked like the divorce between God and the Jewish people. It looked like the bond was over. The covenant was destroyed. It's done. You're not my people anymore. I'm not your God. You can't say anymore, Anu Amecha, V'ata Elokeinu, Anu Banecha, V'ata Avinu, Anu Rayasecha, V'ata Dodenu, Anu Tzeinecha, V'ata Rayenu. That was all in the past. And that was the great Christian claim to the Jewish people. There is a New Testament. What means new? The old one is the old one. It's obsolete. And there's a new one. There's a new covenant, a new people. Look how oppressed you are. It looked like Gittin. It looked like a divorce. But Reb Tzadok says it only looked like a divorce. It was not a divorce. So that's why all the stories of the Churban are Maseches Gittin, including this story about Yoshka. Why? So Reb Tzadok says something fascinating. I want to read it inside, but I just want to give you the sneak preview. He says, when you look at a Jew who's divorced from God, who would be the poster boy for a Jew who's divorced from God? Obviously, Yoshka. So his story comes in here. Let's see what he says. Reb Tzadok, Dushas HaShabbos Maimer Gimel. V'chein ma shenikva Maimer zedet ha'chazima bein nevi u'masayim l'parshis yisrael be'inyan ha'churban. Why does this story come in here? Obviously, because Unkelus brought up Titus, and Titus is part of the story. He says, but it's deeper. Ki zeh mikaymai haroi. This is the right place for it. And this is what he writes. Ki oz haya hisgalus davar zeh. At that period in Jewish history, this truth was revealed. Sha'afilu poishe Yisrael, shehirbu kol kach lifshaya, at shenidoinu begerish. Even the greatest sinners of Israel who sinned so much to the point that God said, we can't have an open relationship. You need to be expelled. This is not working. Gam heim loy nekar shem Yisrael mehem al yedeza. Even they don't think that the name Yisrael was uprooted from them. It was not. Liyois chas v'shalom kechal hagoyim beis Yisrael. To think that they're just another guy. They're just like other nations. V'ha'oilal ruchachem hoyer leisiya ki biyad chazaka emloich aleim shabal karcha chem Yisrael hamekudoshim la'avedasa yizbar. Yecheskel Hanavi says in his prophecy, he says, some of the Jews say, we're just going to be like all the nations. We just want to be regular people. We're not Jewish. We're going to assimilate. And God says, it's never going to happen. I will always be your king. What does that mean? It means I'm going to force you to be Jewish. So he says, no, it means that that's who you are. Even if I try very hard to become a horse, Y. Jacobson, it won't work. There are advantages in being a horse. The horse runs a lot faster than I can run. Even some people run a lot faster than I can run. The horse can take you up mountains, can take you up Kakiat Park in like 3 minutes instead of an hour and a half. Horses are incredible, incredible animals. They have great advantages. But as much as I try, I cannot become that. So Reb Tzadok says you always have to know who you are. I can't change my energy. I can't become you. You can't become me. I can't become another person. I can't become I can't become an insect, I can't become an animal. I could decide that I'm a horse. You know, there's the old Reb Shalom Shvadron was the big Maggid from Yerushalayim. He was a very funny man. You know, he could be very cynical. So he once said, he would speak in Yiddish, Yerushalayim in Yiddish. So he said, Abacha, Yeshiva Bacha once came to me and said, Rav Shvadron, I'm very, very jealous of animals, of behemoths. He says, why? He says, they don't have to daven, they don't have to learn, they don't have to go to shul, they don't have to eat with cutlery, they don't have to use a bathroom, they don't have to get dressed, they don't have to have manners, there's no ethical behavior, they do whatever they want, however they want, whatever they want, wherever they want. And he starts sobbing and he says, God, why didn't you make me a behemoth, an animal? So he says, I looked at the Bacher and I said, Bacher, du hast nicht was zu weinen, du bist a behemoth. My dear boy, you got nothing to cry, you are a behemoth. But the real point is, as much as I could try to behave that way, there's the DNA of a human being. There's the DNA of a donkey, there's the DNA of an elephant, and each one has its unique purpose. Says Reb Tzadok, you have to know who you are intrinsically. So Dafka in this story of Gittin, you're saying even this Jew, don't think that the name Yisrael was uprooted from him. It's all external. It's like a dibuk, You know what a dibuk is? It connects. It goes in. And the venom can go deep. It can be injected deeply. But it's still something that's connected from outside. And therefore, the moment you come to a place of truth and you right away see the difference between the external layers and their internal core, everything falls apart. That's all you need to see. Truth. And that's exactly what healing looks like. Healing is really a moment. To integrate it may take a few years. But the healing is a moment. It says in Zohar that Tshuva is b'shayta chada u'beriga chada, in 1 second. How? 1 second? Yeah, because it's really just, wow. And it's extremely emotional because everything gets upended. Everything. Everything I thought I see was wrong, and everything I didn't even imagine. Wow. And suddenly a person realizes how sophisticated our psyches are to be able to build castles in the air and then live in them and then sell them or charge rent for them. And when they're falling apart, just build fake foundations. And that's literally what people are capable of doing. According to this, we understand a very, very powerful teaching of the Zohar that at first glance seems so strange. And this is your second source on the second side of your source sheets. Zohar Parshas Vayera. Fascinating. The Zohar says, background, Rabbi Yehuda says, that Noach did not behave correctly. Hashem told him there's going to be a flood, and he said, okay. He didn't protest, he didn't pray, he didn't daven. He just went on with his business building the teva. He was a good guy for himself, but he really could not care for the generation. And Rabbi Yehuda says, you know who's the father of compassion? Avram Avinu. When Avram Avinu heard that Sodom is going to be destroyed, he protested. He said, Chalila, how can you do this? Will the God of justice not behave justly? That's what Rabbi Yehuda said. Seems very nice. Avram Avinu, the man of love, comes to Zohar and says it's not so simple. Omar Rebbe Lazar, Af Avram loy avad shlimu k'dekayos. Even Avram did not really behave the way you're supposed to behave. Rebbe Lazar argues with Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Why? So he says, I'll tell you why. You know what he asked God? He said, how could you destroy a tzaddik with a rasha? There are tzaddikim in Sdom. So Hashem said, show me. Find me 50, find me 45, 40, 30, 20, 10. Garnished. So Avram said, okay, you're right. So the Zohar says, no, there was something missing there. Man avit shlimu kedekaya is the Moshe. Moshe teaches us what to do. What happens? The Amar, after the Jews create the golden calf. So there were those who worshipped it, there was those who created, there was those who were quiet and acquiesced and didn't protest. Amar, Moshe tells Hashem, if you forgive all of them, good. And if not, erase me from the Torah that you have written. I don't have anything to do with you anymore. It's them. Either you got to choose them or you're done with me. If it's a choice between you and them, I'm choosing them. Erase me from the Sefer Torah. That's what he tells Hashem. Says the Zohar. It's a quote, direct quote. Even though they all sinned in one way or another. He did not budge till Hashem says, I forgive. Moshe is the true shepherd, the faithful shepherd who protects his generation. Avram asks for the tzaddikim. He cares for Sdom. He's not like Noach. He cares for Sdom, but for the tzaddikim. The Rishayim, he says, they could go rot. It's not my business. Hashem says there's no tzaddikim. He's like, okay, you're right. That's not what Moshe did. Moshe said, I want you to forgive them, people who need forgiveness. And if not, erase me from the Sefer Torah. So the Zohar is saying that even Avram Avinu did not model that reality, that love, that connection. Moshe did. Now, this is not a flaw in Avram Avinu. Why not? Avram Avinu lived before Matan Torah. Avram Avinu lived before the giving of the Torah. Once the Torah was given, Ata v'chartanu, mikol ha'amim ahavta yisanu b'ratzisa banu. And it says, before Mandela, Hashem said, V'atem tiyu li mamleches koyanim v'goy kodesh. You will be for me a kingdom of princes and a holy nation. Who? Everyone. Every soul is a chelik eloka mimal mamash, like it says in Tanya and in many svarim. Every soul is a piece of Hashem. That's your DNA. That's your spiritual, intrinsic core. I once saw a letter from an Israeli Jew. He wrote to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he introduced himself, Ani Chiloni. You know what a Chiloni is, right? Everybody knows. I'm a secular Israeli. So the Rebbe wrote him back, the Lubavitcher wrote him back a letter, and I remember one beautiful paragraph. He said, I hope you'll forgive me if I disagree with you. I cannot accept your adjective about yourself, because since God declared, Va'atem tiyu li mamleches koyanim v'goy kadosh, you will be for me a holy nation. The creator of the world established that there's no such a thing as a chiloni milashon choil. The word chiloni comes from the word choil, mundane, earthy, unholy. There's no such a thing. Sorry. I'm sorry, I can't agree with you. You may think you are, you may behave like one, you may not have much knowledge, whatever it is. But essentially, you're mamleches koyanim v'goy kadosh. Because Moshe felt it in his bones, he knew it. So therefore Hashem said, leave me alone or I'll destroy them. And Moshe understood if he doesn't leave him alone, he won't destroy them. And that's when he went and pleaded and he achieved and revealed the essence, which is Salachti Kidvarecha. So Moshe Rabbeinu understood that there may be deep disagreements between Jews. There may be Jews who sadly fall very, very low, but for him to detach, for him to say, they're not Jewish, they're Goyim, I couldn't care less, go rot in purgatory, that concept stopped existing. That theme, that idea literally comes from a lack of a basic understanding in the essence of a Jew, which is part of the essence of Judaism. Because if I don't understand that, what do I know about Judaism if I don't understand the essence of what it means to be a Jew? So what we're learning here is that it's not that Judaism is a religion, and either you practice it and you don't practice it, and if you don't practice it, then you're not connected to it. But rather, it's actually the color of your soul. I can't change the color of my eyes. I can't change the color of my soul. There could be a person who's more religious, who's less religious, who's more knowledgeable, who's less knowledgeable, who's more in touch with their essence, who's less in touch with their essence. That's very possible. But at the essence and the core, Moshe Rabbeinu says, it's all one. It's a chelek elokah mimal mamash. Comes Reb Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin and says, let me show you how far this goes. We all know, it says, Kol Yisrael yesh lam chelek lo'olam haba. But then the Mishnah says, besides this one, besides that one, besides that one, besides that one. And if you do this, ein lechelek, right? So Reb Tzadok says, let's really give perspective to all of this. And let's see the third source. Pri Tzadik Vayikra Chag HaPesach. This is Pri Tzadik again of Reb Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin. V'chein Isa b'Gemara. It says in Gemara Sanhedrin 44. Ba'achan. Afal pi shechata Yisrael. You remember who Achan was? Achan was somebody who Yeshua warned nobody should take the booty of Yericho. He went and he took. And he already took it before by Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Gemara says that God told Yeshua ben Nun, Chata Yisrael, a Yisrael sinned. So the Gemara says, you see from here that even though Achan rebelled in such a defiant way, he's called Yisrael. And the Gemara says, Asa Dikabini Chilfi, Asa Shmai, V'asa Karile. Asa is a hadas, a myrtle. A myrtle between thorns is still a myrtle, and it's called a myrtle, and it smells like a myrtle. So sometimes a person, what an imagery. I could be surrounded by thorns, by cover-ups. I may have a prickly part, a part that stings, that's snidey, that's aggressive. It's all my fake self. It's a survival skill. Sometimes you're married to a person, sometimes you have a friend, sometimes you have somebody in the family, they're so confrontational, they're so difficult, they're so challenging. We get very, very affected by it, and it's normal because it hurts. Really, when we become stronger in of ourselves, we can literally watch and have compassion for a soul that is in prison, for somebody who's so uncomfortable in their own skin, and this is how they learn to survive. The hadas is surrounded by thorns, but he says, still call it a hadas. Even though there's thorns everywhere, you still call it a hadas. That's Achan. And he says, Afsha over al kol Torah. The Gemara says that Achan transgressed the whole Torah. He did adultery. He did a lot of crazy things. Umashach ba'ar lasa. Not only that, he reversed his bris. Sheratza shelo yakiru bo shehu mol. He didn't want anybody should see he's Jewish. He reversed his circumcision. Afal pikein amar lo Yeshua. Ya'achercha Hashem hayoyim hazeh ta'achav yesh lecha chelek l'olam haba. Yeshua still tells him, you are Yisrael. Here in this world, you're going to be penalized. In the next world, you have a chelek l'olam haba. But even Achan, it's Yisrael. And Yisrael is li roish. God calls it my head. Ki sarisim elikim v'manashim batuch. V'gam isa b'mishnah. It says in Mishnah Sanhedrin, page 90, Shloish malachim v'arba hadyotis ein lem chelik lo'elam haba. 3 kings and 4 regular people don't have a chelik in olam haba. And he goes through the kings. You have Menashe, you have Achav. These were wicked kings. Yeravam. You have Balaam, Doeg, Achisofel. These are people who were really, really perverse. They have no chelik in olam haba. It's a Mishnah in Sanhedrin. We say it before Pirkei Avos, we say the first part. This is the second part. The Gemara comes, Kuf Dalet Sanhedrin, and says, Dorshe Rishumais Amru Kulam Bayim Lo'elam Haba Chutz Mibilam. Dorshe Rishumais means those who expounded on the manuscripts. Rishimais, they say they all have a chelik in olam haba besides Balaam. I don't understand. The Mishnah says they don't have. Comes the Gemara and says there were those who expounded some rishimais, some manuscripts, and they said Yesh lam chelik olam haba. They're arguing with the sages. So the Tzadok says there's a very deep idea. What does Dorshe Rishumais mean? What, they found some hidden manuscript that argued with the Mishnah? The word Roshim is the word Rishimu. You know what Roshim means in Hebrew? Anybody? A Roshim. An impression, like an imprint. Right? I may dip my finger in oil. Even if I wash off my finger, there's still a Roshim. There's a residue. You may have a little ink. You may have a little oil. Right? Even if I dyed whatever, I take over the dye, there's still a Roshim. There's an imprint. It's called a residue. It says Dorshe Rishumais means something incredibly deep. Dorshe Rishumais hainu shemasigim hargasha lamayla miseichel anushi. They have a sense, they have intuition for something that is beyond human intellect. V'urakamay roshim. It's only like a little roshim. It's like a little intuitive secret that's not so bold and visible. The Anshe Knesset Hagdola Amru Aleim Shein Lem Chelik Olam Haba Al Pi Seichel As Hagas Anushi. The Anshe Knesset Hagdola said they don't have a chelik in olam haba based on intellect, based on human awareness and intellect. These guys lost it. They're done. They're finished. They have gone over the deep end. They're finished. They're doomed. But those who know how to see the roshim, the imprint of the soul, in a secret way, embedded in the subconscious, beyond regular visible intellect, they said they have a chelik. Machmas Shem Zera Yisrael v'afal pisha chata Yisrael hu v'lo yidach mimenu yidach. Nobody is lost. But for this, you'd have to know rishimais. What does this mean? Sometimes the soul is so hidden, you have to be a dorshe rishumais. True, if I look visibly on the outside, of course, ein lo chelik olam haba. Person is a rasha, the person is wicked, the person is harmful, the person is defiant, the person is his cousin, the person is immoral. And he says that's true. So the Anshe Knesset Hagdola Sanad the Mishnah Elam Chelik Olam Haba comes the Gemara and says, there's Dorshe Rishumas. There's those who know how to take a spiritual X-ray, an MRI of the soul, and they could look very, very deep. They could pierce through all the outer layers and explore the core. And at the core, suddenly they see there's an innocence, there's a purity that got so perverted, that got so lost, that went down such deviant pathways and got stuck in all of these layers of darkness and debris. But if you move it all away, you'll see, of course, Yesh Lam Chelik Olam Haba, because the Chelik Elikami Mal Mamish can't get destroyed. That's why the Arizal writes, and the Shalor writes, and the Emek HaMelech writes, and the Reish Chacham, the great Kabbalists write, that ultimately every neshama Yesh Chelik Olam Haba. Even when it says Ein, it can't be otherwise. Because if it's a piece of Hashem is not going to be destroyed. It's not like a piece of God is going to be obliterated forever and is going to be lost forever. If it's a chelik elikami ma'al mamish, ultimately, a chelik of Hashem is like all of Hashem. It's one etzem, it's one essence. It's going to come back to find its true source, even though it goes through difficult processes. And he says, and now you'll understand a great secret in the Haggadah. One of the funniest things in the Haggadah, or the saddest things in the Haggadah is, you have a 4th child, he's called a Rasha. And he says, Mommy, Tati, what are you doing? Ma avodah zayis lechem, when you have to clean for Pesach. 2 months, drive yourself crazy. Go to a hotel. And even a hotel who has time for all this stupid ma avodah zayis lechem. So what do you tell him? You tell him, Bavur ze asa Hashem li b'tzeishim Mitzrayim, li v'lo ilu haya sham lo haya nigal. If you would have been there, you would have never been redeemed. Okay, what now? You would have never been redeemed. What's the message? The message is you're a really bad kid and we should have never taken you out of Mitzrayim. This was a bad idea to have you as a child. Is that the message? Is that going to help anybody? You ever tried that on your child? I don't think it's going to work. So Reb Tzadok says we completely misunderstand what the Haggadah is saying. Next paragraph. Al Shailas ben Harasha ba tshuva ilu haya sham loy haya nigal. You know what you're telling him? If he would have been there, he wouldn't have been redeemed. Aval achar shagal oisanu Hashem yizbarach. Va'oso isanu l'uma Yisraelis. Me'ata kivan shagam hu noiled mi'Yisrael v'nimel l'shmoina. Lo yoyi lo rish asay lo hoitzi atzmi meklal Yisrael. Afal pisha asa to'eves v'afal pisha chata Yisrael hu v'yeloi gam tikun al kol masav. If you would have been there in Mitzrayim, you had a choice. You want to join, you don't want to join. It would have been your choice. Once God took us out of Mitzrayim, including you, and you came to Matan Torah, now you are holy forever and ever and ever. You could scream, you could be defiant, you could say you're the worst Jew, you don't believe in anything, but I'm telling you, Hayasham, over there you wouldn't have been redeemed. Once you're here, it's all over. This last Geula, of course you're going to be redeemed. Because Yisrael, because it's an intrinsic core. It's not a question if you wanted it, it's a question of who you really, really are. What does truth look like? The moment you're going to see your own truth, the moment you will face your own authenticity and honesty with candidness, the moment you won't be able to delude yourself and live in a bubble, you will right away see that you were redeemed, that you were divine, that you're completely aligned with the divine will. That actually to be healthy, to live, for a Jew to live Jewishly means to live healthy. It means to live with your energy. It means to live in alignment. It means to live in flow. It means to actually be who you really are without any need to distract yourself because you're so uncomfortable with your own essence. And he continues, he says in Tzidkas HaTzadik Ayin Ches, Al Zeh Amar LeChizkiah Perek Kama de Brachas, Chizkiah HaMelech did not want to get married. You know why? He was a prophet. He saw he's going to have a son named Menashe. Menashe was the worst king of the Jewish people. He was a king for 55 years. And he was a true wicked man. Chizkiah said, why should I bring him to the world? Why? I'm not getting married. And what did Yeshaya HaNavi tell him? Stop mixing into God's business. Know your place in the world. You were told to get married and build a family. How it works out? None of your business. You're not the master of the world. Powerful words. Yechizkiah was sick. He was about to die. Yeshaya said, why are you mixing in? You're going out of your lane. Nobody asked you to figure out who your child is going to be. So Reb Tzadok says something amazing. But he was right. Look, he was right. The guy was right. Chizkiah was a very bad king. Menashe, sorry. Says Tzidkas HaTzadik, Reb Tzadok, in fact, Menashe is one of those people that we learned earlier, doesn't have a Chel Olam Haba. He says, look, what would have happened if Menashe wouldn't have been born? Mashiach ben David. We would have never had Mashiach ben David. All comes from Menashe. Chizkiah is a grandson ultimately of David HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech, David HaMelech. The chain goes through Menashe. V'chol hashalsheles hakdusha min ha'olam ilu loy noilad. The entire chain of holiness in the world that comes from Malchus Beis David till Moshiach goes through Menashe. So on one hand, Chizkiah says he's a Rasha Merusha. Yeshaya Navi says don't mix into Hashem's cheshbonos. Suddenly you see something. You see that Menashe was an indispensable component. If Menashe wouldn't have been born, the chain to Mashiach couldn't come in. That's what Yeshaya Navi was telling you. There is a secret journey of souls beyond what anybody understands. Sometimes people look at their children. Today we live in a generation, a lot of people are struggling with their children. And sometimes it's very, very easy to put it all on our children. They're defying their parents, they're shaming the family, they're shaming the community. Why can't you just behave? Why can't you just do this? We're learning here, the first thing you have to remember is your child is holier than anybody will ever imagine. It's very easy to go into a place of guilt and shame, and you don't fit in, and why can you be like your brother, and why do you have to quit this, whatever it is, and what's with nachas, and you can't come to this wedding, and you can't come to this, and it's embarrassing for Tat Nefega, and Bubby's not going to tolerate this, and she's going to have a heart attack because you. And the Auschwitz survivors are turning over in their grave because of you. Whoa. And this poor kid is suffering from enough anxiety his whole life, and now he really gets anxiety. First of all, we have to take a deep breath and have to understand that God is bigger than anybody imagines or thinks. And religion is not always reduced to the little box and picture that this person thinks or that person thinks. And although we all crave and yearn for our children to be able to be healthy physically, emotionally, spiritually, never ever could we stop believing and seeing their infinite holiness. And even if on the outside there seems to be so many disturbing things, never allow your mind and your soul to tune out and just zoom in on the thorn, zoom out and see an angel that is there. See it. And by the way, you can only see it in your child if you see it in yourself. People who don't see it in themselves have a very hard time seeing it in other people. And then I can help people discover that more. When I believe in them, they can believe in themselves. I can identify that more. We also have to realize something else. Every soul has a journey, and nobody knows what the journey of an neshama is. And it's not always your fault. It's usually not. We may have, played a role. Mommies and tatis play a significant role. But like we learned last week in Maseh, there's sibas hasibois. There's the cause of the causes. Every soul has a journey. Chizkiah said Menashe is a rotten tomato, a rotten potato. He's just a force of destruction. And Yeshaya said, whoa, without him there's no Moshiach. Really? There's some mystery of what souls go through and journeys they go through which a light comes into the world. We want to be there for them. We want to hold space for them. We want to embrace them. We want to love them. We never want to despair and give up on them. And therefore, we learn here that even Menashe somehow was indispensable in this chain. Now you'll say, who needs all of this? Why does it have to be like this process? Those are good questions. But like Yeshaya told Chizkiah, don't mix into God's business. You do what you have to do. Let him run his world. You run your world. There's things I could know, and there's things I can't know. Now we come to a very special moment. Reb Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin reveals to us what really happened to Yoshka. What happened to Oisiyah? We learned here that he had a pure soul. In Olam HaEmes, he tells Unkelus, of course become a Jew. What's the question? They are God's apple. So what happened to him? How did he drift away so far? What happened? Reb Tzadok addresses one more person in Jewish history who also created havoc. And it's connected to Tisha B'Av. His name was Shabsi Tzvi. Shabsi Tzvi was born in Turkey. He was born on Shabbos. That's why he's called Shabsi. He was born on Tisha B'Av, which was on Shabbos. That's why they called him Shabsi. He was born on Shabbos besides Tzvi. He was a very, very charismatic person. He was a very spiritual person. He was a very deep person. At some point, he declared himself the Messiah, the Moshiach. And he said, I was born on Shabbos and on Tisha B'Av. He also had a very good spokesman, a man named Nassan Ha'azasi, Nathan from Gaza, who was a brilliant PR man, and he really got the message out. And with his charisma and his spirituality, he managed, sadly, to lure not hundreds and not thousands, but tens of thousands, maybe more, of Jews into this trap, to the point that much of European Jewry, fell prey to this idea and even gave dates. In fact, in Turkey, Jews were intoxicated by it. And then when he was arrested, and in 1666, he was arrested and he converts to Islam. Because they offered him, either you convert to Islam or you die. And he converted to Islam. The moral downfall of the Jewish people at that time was horrific. It was a long gullus, their hopes were high, and it was all a fiasco. It was Lehoya V'Leinu. This is the story of Shabsi Tzvi. Reb Tzadok, in a very unique moment here, addresses these two people. What happened to Yoshka, Oisiyah Ish, what happened to Shabsi Tzvi, both Jews. One ended up becoming the father of Christianity. One ended up becoming a Muslim. And he addresses it through one more person. Of course, not in the same level. And that's the very, very famous person, Adam Harisha. And this is what Reb Tzadok says. Very, very deep and fascinating words. It's the third to the last paragraph. Machshavos charutz, Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen Melublin Perek Aleph. I'm going to read it fast and explain. V'cheit Adam Harishon haya b'machshava. The sin of Adam HaRishon was all in his thought. We look at the story, we say, oh, he saw an apple tree, he pulled off an apple. This is a good, healthy apple. Here, you need nutrition. You need apples, enough with the cotton candy and the pizza and the pasta and the carbs. Here's an apple. And that's the end of the story, and history was changed. Oh, Chava gave him the apple. Got it. Yeah. Reb Tzadok says, and the truth is it wasn't even an apple, either it was an esrog or wheat or a vine or a fig. But Chava gave it to Adam, and he said, this is nutritious. Instead of eating your cheesecake at the bris and at the bar mitzvah, you eat my apples and you'll be fine. Okay. Since then, wives are telling husbands what to eat, what not to eat. And that's why there's a mechitza by the simcha, so that the men could eat whatever they want. That was just a joke. Okay. Maybe not. Comes Reb Tzadok and says, it's a deep class, so we need a little humor, it's fine. Comes Reb Tzadok and says, it's much deeper than that. Eating is always a symbol. Everybody knows when you eat, either you're mindful or you're not mindful. If I'm mindful when I eat, it's one type of eating. If I'm not mindful when I eat, it's a different type of eating. If I'm not mindful when I eat everything. I relate to that. I don't know if anybody does. If you don't, you're lucky. When you're mindful what you eat, you actually eat what you need to eat based on your body. So even any act of eating is always associated with consciousness. So Reb Tzadok says the whole story of the eating was really a story about consciousness. Chet Adam HaRishon haya b'machshava. The chet of Adam was in machshava, was in thought, it was in consciousness. We don't realize how deep consciousness is. The inner energy of a person, that's what machshava is, the inner energy of a person. Your state of mind, that inner thought. Before you do anything, there's always a thought that comes into you. Before I stretch out my hand, before I take a cookie, before I call somebody, before I pick up my phone, before I write something, before I go out, there's always an energy, an inner thought that drives it. That's like the gas, the gasoline that drives us. He says something happened in his machshava. Like it says in Zayr. This is the dimyon that the snake put into him and Chava. The snake told Chava, if you eat, you will both be like God. You will know good and evil. He says he put into Adam and Chava a dimyon. A dimyon is an imagination, a thought. What was this? This is the source of all the thoughts of vanity, of demyonis, imaginations, of a person. The source of all distortions in people's thoughts is that a person starts imagining that he or she is in a state that is really above them, and they're not ready for that state. It's not who they are. They start imagining themselves to be somebody who they are not, and as a result of that, they start believing a fictional story that is not real. We see it even in very, very practical ways. Sometimes a person starts feeling guilt or shame over a particular behavior, over a particular thought, and that is often based on, it says in Tanya, that's often based on the fact that I don't know who I am. I feel like this is below me. This is below my dignity. Why am I dealing with this? It's really a form of displaced arrogance. I don't even know who I am. So the source of so much distortion is a person thinks that they're supposed to be somebody else or that they are somebody else, and they don't really accept and understand who they are. The serpent put in such a powerful thought, you're going to be like God. The Yisam Kelikin. And he says, Adam HaRishon was the ultimate perfection. Al derech ani amarti elikim atem. You remember it says in Tehillim, Ani amarti elikim atem ubnei elyon kolchem. God said, I look at you and I say, you're gods, you're divine. You're bnei elyon, you're children of the superior one. Achin ka'adam tamusam. Ani amarti elikim atem. When I look at you, I see you as divine. Adam lived up to that. He had no choice. He had no question. He wasn't born from a father and a mother. He knew he was divine. He was created by the divine. He had no question. He didn't have a father and a mother and just say there was natural selection of Charles Darwin. Adam HaRishon was formed by God. So he was the ultimate perfection. What happens? Hichnis by dimyan sheyi mamish came. The snake comes and puts in a dimyan, an imagination into Adam. You're not just formed by God. You're not just a manifestation of God. You're not just a flow of God. You're mamish God. You're like a replace. You mamish Cain. This is it. The Yisam Kelikim. You're in charge. You're mamish God. And he said, there's a truth there. The dimyon works because Adam Arishon is so refined. He is so in flow. He is so one with the divine that this is the dimyon. You're mamishet. You're it. You're God. That's why the Torah has a special mitzvah. You be holy because I'm holy. So the Medrash says, what it means is, Yachal Kamayni, you could think you'd be as holy as me. Remember, I'm holier than you. Why does the Torah have to say this? Because the true holiness of a person is so deep that you could start thinking you're as holy as Hashem. So he has to say, this was Adam's mistake. Yachal Kamayni, no. You become so holy, you're like an angel. You still have choice. What's the choice? The Yetzirah doesn't leave him. He entices him. He speaks to him and says, that you could become mamish Hashem. You're as holy mamish Hashem. That's how deep it is, and it's really from the Yetzirah. And what happens now? And from there, he could throw you down from the highest roof to the deepest abyss. Once you go out of your human lane and you really experience yourself as Hashem, now the downfall is powerful. This is what happened to Oisei Ha'ish. He says Laha'ish. He means Oisei Ha'ish Yashke and Shabsi Tzvi. Shem Rishayim Yerkav. Listen to his words. They were so ascetic. They were so holy. They have so separated themselves from the physical cravings and temptations. Govar koyach hadimyin shebehen. Their imagination power, their spiritual imagination became so powerful, lachshav to think, sheyuchlu l'damois la'elyon. They started to think that they're already on par with Hashem himself. Ubalaam ayidei shechashvu atzmam tchila kedoshim. Because they initially saw themselves as so holy, and then they crossed that human border, and they did not accept the humility and the vulnerability of being a human being. And understanding, you're one with God, you can be in flow with God, but you need to accept the vulnerable reality that I'm a human being. And that is exactly what Hashem wants. Because our whole purpose here is not to be God. God is God, He's fine. Our purpose is to bring Hashem into humanness, v'shachanti b'soicha, to create a dira b'tachtayim, to make a world, a physical world, a home for Hashem. So it's the earth that becomes divine, it's the human that becomes divine, bringing the human into the process. Anshe Kodesh, I want your humanness, I want your vulnerability, I want your limitations. So it's not that our limitations are a source of embarrassment. That is exactly our mission, to bring in your choice, your otherness. God himself is infinite, but he wanted that otherness. He wanted the you. He wanted the human being who has needs, who has vulnerabilities, who has weaknesses, who is mortal. And that's how you become Elikim. That's precisely how you develop your deepest relationship as a human being. But there is a grief there. There's a challenge there. Because the human being is so divine that there is that temptation of the deepest spiritual people just to cross that border. Let go of your humanness. And it's a big nisayan. Not everybody can understand this. But those who really, really do deep spiritual work know that in the very deep place, the borders are so ambiguous because the soul is so in tuned. We are so wired into the truth. Our antennas are so sensitive. Once you remove blockages, there is such a light that shines through every person. That's when the snake shows up and says, just cross the border. You're it. And then you let go of that pain. The last pain is gone. And that's where you get thrown off completely because you lose everything. At that moment, you become God. You become an Avodah Zarah. You become a contradiction. It's always knowing I'm one with Hashem completely in that humility. I'm here to serve. I'm a channel. I'm a channel for the light that comes through me as a human being, and I bring in all my parts, including my human parts. So here we see the downfall of such a great person. But what was it based on? It was based on such a deep sense of spiritual intimacy, of such a deep spiritual sense of oneness. It's very true, by the way. A lot of people are into spiritual healing and spiritual growth, and they go on deep, deep, deep journeys. And in their own way, we could make this mistake. And it makes sense, because you cross a border because you want to avoid that last obstacle, you see, the soul misses Hashem. It's Einoid Malvade. We're all part of that oneness. And when we come down here, there's a missing, there's a yearning. And that's really our pain. Our deepest pain is, that's the point of it all, that we miss Hashem. We don't know that that's the pain. So I think, if I'm going to have another piece of cake, if I'm going to have another couple of dollars, if I'll have another couple of toys, if I'll have some more validation, if I'll get some attention, if I'll get this tzatzke, that tzatzke, this, that, I'll be happy. I'm still not happy, because the real pain is I'm yearning for Hashem. I'm missing Hashem. That pain is essential to life. It's essential for me being human and surrendering with humility to become the channel that I need to be, not to replace the master of everything and think that now I have it figured out, and then I lose the entire plot. Now, here we come to the last inning, so to speak. And here we come to the last inning. And this is an incredible, incredible story. The truth is, it's a story that is very difficult to comprehend. It's a very intense story about the Baal Shem Tov. But it is so powerful in so many ways and so necessary to understand. And it really shows us a whole other dimension that we often do not realize. Shabsi Tzvi died around 1676. I think he converted in 1666, Taf Chavav. Remember, this is only 20 years after the Khmelnytsky pogroms of 1648, 1649, Tachtat. So the Jewish world was devastated and broken, and that's why they looked up to this Moshiach. 1676, he was dead. The Baal Shem Tov was born 1698. When Shabsi Tzvi died, when he converted, most Jews sobered up. A lot of rabbis fell prey for him, because he was a big man. He was a Talmud Chacham, he was a big man. He ate on Tisha B'Av. He said there's no halacha anymore. He ate on Tisha B'Av and he made a bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, matir isurim. But still there was those who believed in him, those who didn't. But once he converted, most of the Jewish world sobered up, obviously. But there was a group of students known as the Frankisten. Ever heard of them? Founded by Yaakov Frank. And they said that Moshiach has to convert to Islam. Why? Because Moshiach has to go down to the lowest klipos and take out the sparks, and then he can redeem the world. Now, once you go there, you could destroy the whole Torah, the whole halacha. It was over. But there was a group that maintained, there's still a little group in Turkey that still believes it. Followers of Shabsi Tzvi, they do a carbon Pesach before Pesach. These were the Frankisten. The Baal Shem Tov spent a lot of time, there was a huge debate between him and the Frankisten. They created a lot of havoc in Eastern Europe in the subsequent decades after Shabsi Tzvi's death. The Baal Shem Tov was born 1698, became the founder of the Hasidic movement, and one of the greatest spiritual masters in the history of Judaism, who really infused Yiddishkeit with this mystical and spiritual depth of the world of Hasidus. It is a sefer called Shvachei HaBaal Shem Tov, stories about the Baal Shem Tov. There's an incredible story about the Baal Shem Tov that the Baal Shem Tov himself shared, according to this manuscript, about an experience he had after Shabsi Tzvi's death. Let's see the story. Last source. Shvachei HaBaal Shem Tov. Oy tzipeli Rabbi Yoel, sheba Shabsi Tzvi leBaal Shem Tov levakesh mimenu takana. Shabsi Tzvi, after his death, comes to the Baal Shem Tov to ask him for a tikkun. He wants his soul to be fixed. Remember, Shabsi Tzvi is Jewish. We just learned about what a Jew is. Even Yoshke, Shabsi Tzvi, he comes to the Baal Shem Tov, he wants a tikkun. V'amar Rabbi Yoel b'zeh halosh. Rabbi Yoel, who told over the story, said like this: Shahatikun hu li'iskasher nefesh b'nefesh. The Baal Shem Tov understood, how do you correct somebody? You have to connect your soul to their soul. Ruach b'ruach, neshama b'neshama. You hear, you want to be misakin somebody? You have to let your souls merge. I can't sit, a lifeguard can't sit on a throne and say, you idiot, get out of the ocean. It's not how you save somebody. You jump into the water. If you want to fix a soul, you need to find merging with that soul. Sometimes people rebuke. They just tell you, do this, become normal. Doesn't work. There's something in their soul
I need my soul to go into their soul. Our souls have to merge. There's an energy flow. This is deep. If you don't know how to do this, you have to know that you don't know how to do this. But this is how we heal people. We don't heal people through objective analysis. We don't heal people through words. I don't think anybody was ever healed through words. We shame people through words. We could compliment people through words. You heal people when your soul could connect to their soul. Nefesh b'nefesh, ruach b'ruach, neshama b'neshama, which are different frequencies of the soul. And it's in that level where their energy feels it, their nervous system is regulated, healing can happen. So the Baal Shem Tov, v'hischil is kasher imoy b'masam. The Baal Shem Tov wants to heal him, to heal his soul. So the Baal Shem Tov starts connecting to him, but very slowly. Why? Ki haya yare. The Baal Shem Tov was scared. Ki haya rasha gadol. Because Shabsi Tzvi was how do we say? He was one tzatzka. He was a troublemaker. He was a big rasha. And the Baal Shem Tov understood. This is after his death, but the Baal Shem Tov understood that there's a big, big price to pay here. It's not simple to connect to that level. Pa'amachas. One time, Yeshu and Baal Shem Tov, the Baal Shem Tov is sleeping. In sleep, your consciousness is somewhat reduced. Uba Shabsi Tzvi yemach shemai, upita oisei chas v'sham. Shabsi Tzvi comes to him. And somehow he seduces him, he entices him, he overwhelms him. V'hishlich oisei b'hashlacha g'dayla. He throws the soul of the Baal Shem Tov. He hurls. Hashlacha g'dayla means he hurls him, he throws him very far. At shenafa l'sha'ol tachtas. The Baal Shem Tov feels that part of him is in the abyss. Sha'ol tachtas is the abyss. V'hitzitz Baal Shem Tov makim chanisa. Baal Shem Tov always knows the first thing you have to do when you fall into the abyss, look where you are. Very often we're afraid, we close our eyes, I don't want to see. If you don't see, you don't know what to do. You have to see where you are. You have to survey the territory. You have to survey the property so you could place yourself. You could know who you are, what you have to do. So he takes a look. V'ra, and he sees, Shahu im Yeshu, aluach echad shekorin tavil. He sees that he's on the same tablet. Luach is tavil, it's a tablet. Like a luach, a board. With who? With another Jew. Which Jew? Yeshu. He sees how far Shabsi Tzvi threw him down. Here's the other Jew. That same Jew, Yeshu and Shabsi Tzvi, that Reb Tzadok would make a connection between them in a later generation. The Siper. And Rabbi Yoel said, Shah Baal Shem Tov Amar. The Baal Shem Tov said, wow. Haya by Nitzutz Kadosh. Shabsi Tzvi had a holy spark. There was holiness there. He wasn't just a wicked man. The Tafsai HaSamach Mem b'mitzudosei Rachmana litzlan. But the Samach Mem, which means the negative energy, lured him into its net. And he was caught. V'shama meha Baal Shem Tov ha'maisa eich haya ha'nefila shala. And then the Baal Shem Tov told the story how Shabsi Tzvi fell so low. And it was basically two things. Ayidei gadlus v'kas. Through arrogance and anger. Those were the two things. Arrogance and anger. He told the whole story. Va'ani misrashel lichtov. But I'm too lazy to write. Or he means, it's too hard for me to write. Efsher she'echtav leida eich amok hagaiva. But maybe I should write it so people should understand how deep arrogance can go. How deep arrogance can go. That's the end of the story. Now, obviously this is a very, very mystical story. It's above my pay grade. And I am not going to have the arrogance to think for a moment that I get it and I master it and I understand it fully. But I do want to suggest something in context of the entire class. And that is, the Baal Shem Tov is invited here to fix a soul, but not just any soul, a tortured soul. A soul that created havoc and a big, big mess. A Rasha, Shabsi Tzvi. He knows that the Baal Shem Tov could fix him, not anybody else. The Baal Shem Tov has something that can relate to him and see his light. Because I can't fix somebody if I think the guy is a loser and doomed forever. So Shabsi Tzvi understood that the Baal Shem Tov's teachings, the Baal Shem Tov's soul, gives hope to his soul. So he comes to the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov understands you can't fix somebody if you don't go in. You have to experience them. You have to empathize with them. There's no way you could fix somebody if you don't have empathy. If I look at the person and I say, you're just sick, I just judge you, I can't fix you. You're not going to connect to me. I have to really, really connect to you. It's Mesiras Nefesh to fix somebody. You have to go into their world. Mamish. So now what happens? The Baal Shem Tov does that. And in the process, the Baal Shem Tov Kavayachal, whatever that means, I don't know exactly what it means, he falls. He's affected. He's really affected. To the point that he sees the place of Yashka. Shabsi Tzvi and Yashka. That's where he sees. You can understand how deep that experience is. And then the Baal Shem Tov obviously learns how to extricate himself. What he did with Shabsi Tzvi, he doesn't say in this story, but the Baal Shem Tov reveals something to us. And what does he say? That the two factors that made this great soul fall was gadlus and kas. Arrogance and anger. What does that really mean? Where's arrogance? If you're so holy, where's the arrogance and the anger? We already know what the arrogance is. The arrogance is not arrogance, just a superficial, skin deep, foolish arrogance. Just fake haughtiness of vanity. Vanity, everything is vain. Hevel avalim. Vanity, fear. But rather, it's an arrogance that actually comes from a very profound spiritual depth. It's an arrogance that comes from seeing my light so deeply that I'm not ready to accept my humanness. I'm not ready to accept my vulnerability as a human being. To really realize that ultimately at the end of the day, I'm here to serve. I'm a servant. I'm a channel. The more I'm a channel, the more I actually become divine. Because I am not God. I was created by Hashem to manifest Him. The more I can surrender to that and say, I'm going to manifest you as me, as a human being, in the ways that you help me manifest you, with the tools I have, with the resources I have, with tremendous humility, that's actually how you remain completely connected. That's how you remain ani amarti Elokim atem. But that's hard. The einredenish, how do you say einredenish? The delusions, spiritual delusions, that I want to go above that. Take me out of that. And then I completely lose sight and focus of who I really am, and I can create such havoc and disaster because at that moment the snake tells me, you are Hashem. And you use your talents and your charisma, and you lose it. And by the way, we see it even on much lower levels, not Shabsi Tzvi and Yashka. They went to an extreme. We see on lower levels people in leadership, people with charisma, people who actually are very talented and resourceful. They know how to influence people, and they cross a border from which it's very hard to return. There's a deep, deep, subtle spiritual arrogance and anger that comes into them. Judgment, dismissiveness, superiority complex, and they cross a certain border and they become very, very dangerous people. In a different way. Even he was a warrior, he was a fighter, he didn't consider himself a divine prophet. He was a warrior, he was a general, he was a commander. Over there it was arrogance that he told God, don't mix in, I don't need you, don't help me, and don't defeat me. That was also that. And it also comes with anger. Anger means you have no patience for people anymore. I'm angry because a bunch of low people, a bunch of foolish people, such petty. You look at the pettiness of the world and you have no patience for this pettiness. What happened? I forgot about my own humanness. I forgot about my presence in this world to be able to be a loving, uplifting presence, to be able to see the light in people. God doesn't need a second God. He has God, he's fine. He doesn't need a second God to run the world with him. He needs me to be a human, to be divine as a human being. And divine as a human being means divine with the limitations of a human being doing the work with what I could do in my body, with my resources, and grow in that space. And then paradoxically, you reach your deepest growth because you become who you really, really are. You don't become a fake version of yourself. And that's why in the Baal Shem Tov's teachings, you see the exact opposite. You see a constant focus on humility, joy, forgiveness. Constant. The big mistake was the arrogance and the anger. And by the time you'll always see the humility, the simplicity, the humanness, the joy rather than the anger, the acceptance, the forgiveness. It's a divinity you feel by the Baal Shem Tov, but filled with humility, filled with joy, filled with forgiveness, filled with acceptance. In many ways, he understood this energy better than anybody. We spoke 2 weeks ago about prophecy, coming back to the age of prophecy. Moshiach is going to be the age of prophecy. You see more and more people searching to open their hearts, to be able to hear their inner voice. It's very, very powerful times because people who are opening themselves up and doing the work are seeing the depth of their spirituality. Here we come to the second part of it. It only happens for real when it comes with humanness, when it comes with humility, when it comes with forgiveness, when it comes with joy, when it comes with good-spiritedness, when it comes with radical acceptance. It doesn't come with meekness, with weakness. That's not what humility is. Humility is not meekness and not weakness and not surrendering to the wrong things. It means knowing that I am here to serve Hashem, and that's why I have a power that's infinite, but it's completely not mine. I'm just channeling whatever I could channel, and therefore I can accept also the limitations, things that I can channel, things that I'm not ready for, things that I'm not supposed to channel. It's not my job. Everybody has their soul, their mission. Because if I blur that boundary, it becomes extremely, extremely dangerous. And that's why the Beis HaMikdash that a person builds, V'shachanti b'soicham, it's dwelling in me, in my heart, with all the pieces of my heart. So now, as a result of this, we now come back and we understand the depth of what we're learning here. Because the depth of what we're learning here is not like some people think, okay, so every Jew is holy, even Reb Shabsi Tzvi, even Yeshu, much better than Balaam, much better than Titus, and therefore it's just radical acceptance, and everything goes, and everything is permissible because everybody is holy. It's the exact opposite. What we're learning here is that everybody is really connected to Torah. Everybody is really connected to mitzvahs. The moment they see their essence, they want to be aligned with halacha. They want to be aligned with Torah and mitzvahs. That's the divine will. It's the distortions in them that take them away from Torah. So when we understand the holiness in every Jew, it's not like, okay, so it's all fine if everybody abandons the Torah because we just accept everybody, love, 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 and there's never a higher standard and you just lower all the standards because everybody is holy. It's so much more nuanced, it's so much more subtle. It's understanding, yeah, everybody is holy, but sometimes their holiness is blocked. And when we help ourselves and we help others remove all those blockages of Engulfed, remove all those blockages of Balaam and of Titus, and of Isai Ha'ish, then automatically we tune into the truth that Moshe Rabbeinu experienced so deeply that we're all one and we're all connected and everybody is in the pure divine flow. Have a beautiful week and may we merit the rebuilding of our internal Beis HaMikdash and the collective Beis HaMikdash in these 9 days. Take it from Yad Mamish. Next week there is a class.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.